All right, it's a new week here on the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. I had to look down to reread it and make sure I was saying the letters right. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com. Again, it's Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, and message boards to hang out with other Pitt fans and talk about everything going on in the world of Pitt sports. You can have those conversations, and that's what Pitt fans like to do. They like to get together, talk to other Pitt fans, and the best place to do it is the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. Of course, we always ask you to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hit the like button right there on the YouTube page, and then hit the subscribe button anywhere. There's a couple different places you can find it. I don't care where it is, just click it. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That way you never miss any of our Pitt video content that we put up here. Really, every day we have something new for you to consume here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're moving into the middle of May here. I guess first of all I should say I hope all the mothers out there from our the 3 women who watch these videos. It's funny looking at the YouTube analytics. The percentages and numbers of female viewers, at least from what YouTube is able to gather, it's strikingly low, but we appreciate those who do it. And look, I hope all the moms out there had a great Mother's Day yesterday. Hopefully you celebrated your mother in any way that you could. And if you are a mom watching this, I hope you had a nice Mother's Day yesterday. But as we move into the middle of May, just different topics sort of bouncing around in my head. And one thing I thought we could talk about today was players on the offensive side of the ball. And maybe, as we sit here on May 15th, knowing full well that there may be another addition or two to the roster, certainly efforts being made to try and get a transfer wide receiver. Knowing that, but looking at the roster as it's currently constructed, who are the 5 most important offensive players, the 5 key players for the offense this year? And we have to start with an obvious caveat. We're not going to say Phil Jurkovec. That goes without saying. Everybody knows that, because what I said about Keaton Slovis last year at this time is what I would say about Phil Jurkovec this year at this time. Like a lot of parts of this team, I think there's some positions that are not as deep or not as strong as others, but on the whole, I like how this team is put together. Its success will, rise or fall with the quarterback and the play of the quarterback. And that was the case last year, and I think it came to fruition when you saw the quarterback played like crap against Georgia Tech, played like crap against Louisville, among other games, and certainly takes a whole big chunk of the blame in both of those losses, key losses that turned what could have been a 10-2 regular season record into an 8-4 regular season record. Potentially another trip to the ACC championship game ended up not happening because of those 2 losses. And those 2 losses, you can put a whole lot of it, not all of it. I mean, there were plays the defense could have made. Even though I think the defense played well enough to win against Georgia Tech and Louisville last year, they could have made plays. They gave up a really long run late in the Georgia Tech game, and I think there was like a key 3rd down conversion. Maybe they gave up they only gave up maybe like 1 play to Malik Cunningham, and I think it ended up being a big play. They generally played well enough to win, but they could have played a perfect game. They didn't play a perfect game, but they could have played a perfect game and maybe given the team a better chance to win. But it ultimately came down to the quarterback play. The quarterback didn't play well enough in those 2 games, and they ended up losing. That's going to be the case again this year. As the quarterback goes, so too will the team go. Obviously, as the quarterback goes, the offense will go, but it really extends out to the team. And the success of the team is going to be determined by how the quarterback plays. And I think particularly early in the season, it's going to be important for the quarterback and the offense to play really well. As we know, they're replacing 6 starters on defense. And so you're going to have some inexperience on the field, and I think there's probably going to be a bit of a learning curve. And there's probably going to be a stretch early in the season where that youth is sort of exposed and maybe gives up some plays. I think by the end of the year, maybe even by mid-year, maybe even by the start of October, the defense should be playing really, really well. But it might take a little while to get going, which means the offense is going to have to even do more, or at least should go into games expecting to do more in order to give the defense a little bit of a cushion in case some of those mistakes born of inexperience rise to the surface. But we're not going to say Phil Jurkovec here because it's too easy. It's too obvious. He is the most important player here. He's the key player to the offense, key player to the team. We're not going to say him because that's obvious. 5 other players, though, who are key to the offense's success in 2023. No particular order whatsoever, just running down the list. And the first one I come to is Bub Means. And I've talked about Bub Means a lot basically since the spring. After watching him a little bit during the spring, what we are able to see in spring camp, and then seeing him in the spring game make a couple of important catches. And we've talked a lot about those catches. The wide open catch on the sideline, which I think was a really impressive throw by Phil Jurkovec. And then a catch sort of in this, I don't even think it was a triangle. It was like a Bermuda square of defenders. And Bub Means right in the middle of it goes up and makes a really good catch. For a pretty big play, one of the better plays in the spring game. And I think it was important because Bub Means showed he's capable of making that catch. But I think it was important that Phil Jurkovec trusted him to make that catch, that he was willing to put the ball high, a ball that the receiver would have to jump for in the middle of traffic, where if the receiver doesn't make the play, you've got like 4 possible bad outcomes, and not one of those bad outcomes is an incomplete pass. It's like either he catches it, there's one good outcome, or 4 bad outcomes. And quite frankly, an incomplete pass would count as a good outcome compared to those 4 bad outcomes. And so putting the faith and the trust in Bub Means to make that throw, I think was very important. And I think ideally speaks to what Phil Jurkovec experienced over the previous 14 practices of the spring, where he developed that trust in Bub Means. But you're going to need Bub Means to step up because he's going to have to do more in the passing game than he did last year. He caught 27 passes last season, 3rd leading receiver on the team, but less than half of each of the 2 guys in front of him. Jared Wayne caught 60 passes, Konate Mumfield caught 58. You have gone from last year's roster 101 receptions. The players who are gone from the roster, either by graduation or transfer, combined to catch 101 passes last year. Now, obviously, 60 of those were Jared Wayne. But then you have 12 for Vincent Davis, 12 for Izzy Abanikanda, 10 for Jaden Bradley, 3 for Jalen Barton. Gavin Thompson caught 2. Kai Wright caught 1. Marcus Minor caught 1. We're not going to obviously look to see how Pitt can replace the receiving production of one Marcus Minor, but it was a reception that was recorded. And it was one of the 101 receptions recorded by players who are not on the team this year. There were 223 receptions recorded by Pitt last year. 101 of those are gone. So you're going to have to fill in. And it's not like it was a super prolific passing attack to begin with. They were 9th in the ACC last year in pass attempts, 10th in pass completions. So you have a low productivity passing game, and then you lost nearly half of the receptions from a year ago, or the players who were responsible for nearly half of the receptions from a year ago. Some of those are more replaceable than others, but the fact remains that even if you're going to get back to your sort of mid-bottom half passing game, as far as where they were in the ACC a year ago, if you're even going to get back to that level of production, you're going to need some step-up performances. Bub Means is going to have to double his receiving total, which means he's going to have to be more than just a guy who goes down the field and hopes to catch a deep pass. He can't just be a deep threat in that regard. I mean, I think that's an important part of his game, and he needs to develop it, but he also needs to be able to work in the intermediate range. Konate Mumfield needs to work in the intermediate and short range. Dejon Reynolds will probably work in the intermediate and short range. Bub Means will be a deep threat, but he's also got to be a high production receiver. He's got to be more reliable. He has to have a better catch rate than a year ago, and he just needs to be a good receiver. And that's, you've heard my spiel about Bub Means plenty of times over the last month, but the reality is all the physical tools are there. He's just got to be a receiver. And I think because of how much they lost in terms of production in the receiving game, I mean, he's the 2nd leading returning receiver, right, with 27 catches from a year ago. Konate Mumfield, I think, will still be, I said this on the mailbag on Friday, Konate Mumfield, I think, will still be the leading receiver on the team, but Bub Means is going to have to step up that production in a pretty big way. And he needs it for his own personal growth and development and help build himself an NFL resume. And Pitt's offense is going to need it just because they're going to need somebody else to catch passes. Speaking of guys who catch passes, I think Gavin Bartholomew goes into his junior season as one of the most important players on Pitt's offense. I think even Gavin would tell you that last season was a disappointment when he had went from being the number 2 tight end and largely playing an H-back role and catching a bunch of 1-yard passes into the flat and turning him into gains while playing really behind Lucas Krull at tight end. And then, his next year as a sophomore, he's the number 1 tight end, and he still has roughly the same production, at least the same number of catches, roughly. Far worse catch rate, far fewer, yards per catch, and being used in a different way, but ultimately not really contributing all that much. One highlight play against Tennessee, and just not a whole lot else when he should have been one of the primary focal points of this passing game. Now, when you have a low volume passing game like Pitt had last year, you're not going to have a ton of passes to throw to the tight end. But I think there is more that they can get out of Gavin Bartholomew than they did, and I think it's important that they do, because the more they feed Gavin Bartholomew, the more options are going to open up all over the place in the running game and in the more downfield passing, intermediate and deep, with Konate Mumfield, Bub Means, Dejon Reynolds. And and aside from the impact it can have on everybody else, Gavin Bartholomew is just a really good player. I mean, sometimes we talk about get the ball to this guy, get the ball to that guy. If you get the ball to this guy, it's going to open up things for other guys. And I think that'll happen. I think if you throw the ball to the tight end, you're going to open things up in the offense and open up other opportunities. But I think good things happen when you give the ball to Gavin Bartholomew. He doesn't necessarily break a 70-yard touchdown, but good things tend to happen. You tend to move the chains. You tend to get closer to first downs. He's somebody that I would want to get the ball to because he's going to help make plays, and he's going to set up other plays. I just think he's one of the more important players to the development of this passing game, in the overall sort of variety of the passing game, the ability to attack in different ways and attack different areas and identify weaknesses and exploit weaknesses and exploit when teams are over, paying, being overly attentive to other areas. Like, say Konate Mumfield and Bub Means are legitimate threats and teams have to really lock down on trying to defend them. You're going to have opportunities with Gavin Bartholomew, and that's a good thing. You're not just throwing the ball to some chump out there who you hope can catch the ball. He's a good player. And so not only should you have opportunities open up for him, but he can do things with it when you get the ball to him. I think he's one of the more important guys. I'll tell you who else is a really important player on this offense, and we probably talk less about this guy than just about anybody on the team, at least among the 22 starters. And it's Jake Cradle. Jake Cradle is a key piece of this offense. As a returning starter at center, and a guy, who started most of the season last year with Owen Drexel hurt for most of the year, really settled into the position by the end of the year. I think was a really good center for this team by the end of the year. And he returns as a 6th-year senior, lots of starting experience under his belt, and coming back after starting the bulk of last season at the center position. And it's a position where they don't really have a lot of depth. I think BJ Williams, by the end of spring camp, was impressing the coaches and worked his way to a second team role. So much so that Terrence Moore, who had been the backup center, was working at some other positions, tackle or guard, I forget which one, just to try to branch out a little bit. Because I think partially because they were impressed with what they had seen out of BJ Williams. But the reality is, whether it's Williams, whether it's Moore, or whoever you want to step in there, you don't really have much in the way of backup center experience or experienced. You don't have much in the way of experience at the backup center position. And obviously that's a very important position. It's crucial to the offense, making the checks and the calls and all those different things. And Jake Cradle, having a veteran player there, an experienced guy is huge. And I think he's very, very important because of that. And one, because of how good he is. 2, because of his experience. And 3, because they don't have a whole lot behind him, at least not right now. And so I think he's really important. You can say Matt Gonsalves, you could say Branson Taylor, you could say Blake Zabovic or Ryan Jacoby, but with the presence of Ryan Baer, you've sort of got depth at almost all of those spots. I really think you do. and then Jackson Brown's going to come in as a transfer, and he's going to provide some depth, and Jason Collier or Terrence Moore, who I mentioned, Terrence Enos, Trey Anderson. I mean, they've got other depth guys there, but I think because Ryan Baer has been so good as a sophomore, or a redshirt freshman, I guess, you're covered at basically all 4 of those spots. If something happens to Gonçalves, I think Branson Taylor could slide from left tackle to right tackle, and Ryan Baer could step in at left tackle. If something happens to Taylor, Baer can step in for him at left tackle. If something happens to Ryan Jacoby at left guard, Baer can step in at left guard. And if something happens at right guard with Blake Zabovic, you could either put Baer there, you could slide Jacoby from left to right and put in Baer at left guard. Ryan Baer being good alleviates a lot of your depth concerns at basically all 4 guard and tackle spots. We've talked a lot about how that starting lineup might shake out, how if, they can really, on the left side of the line, they can play their 2 best linemen. If it's Taylor and Jacoby, if it's Baer and Jacoby, if it's Taylor and Baer, you can, your best 2 out of those 3 are going to play. And because of Baer's versatility, you can really pick the best 2, because if Baer's one of them, you just put him at tackle or guard, wherever it's sort of dictated by who else is one of the best players. And so that kind of covers them at the tackle and guard spots. Now, if they have 2 injuries, they're going to have to dig a little bit deeper into the depth, but they don't have that kind of coverage at center, which I think is what makes Jake Cradle so important. For this next one, I kind of went back and forth on most important guys. Like I say, I think Gonçalves is really, really important. I think he's going to be really good. I think he's a future NFL player. But I kind of kept coming back to the running backs. And I don't know which running back to go with as the key player. I mean, I think Rodney Hammond's going to be the number 1. I think if he stays healthy, which shouldn't be a problem, he'll be, I think he'll be really good. I think he'll play. I don't think he's going to be the home run threat that Izzy Abanikanda was, but I think he keeps the chains moving. He can contribute to a really solid running game. I like Sibo Flemister a lot. I think he showed some things at the end of the season. I'm intrigued by Derek Davis and the freshman. It's one of those guys. Maybe it's Flemister. You know what I mean? No, it's probably Hammond. If I was going to pick one running back to say this is one of the 5 most important offensive players, I guess it would be Hammond. Or maybe it's Ryan Baer, actually, if you want to go back. I went back and I know who I want to be 5th on this list, the 5th name I mentioned, because I'm going to cheat on it, or cheat with it. But for this 4th spot, I mean, you could pick a running back. You could pick Rodney Hammond. You could pick Ryan Baer because of what I just talked about, the flexibility he gives the staff as far as who they play on the left side of the line, and really the flexibility he alone creates for the depth at all 4 of those spots. So I'm going to call an audible on my own one. Instead of picking a running back, because I think they have a few good players there, I'm going to say Ryan Baer is one of the most important players on the offense, simply because he will allow Dave Borbley and the offensive staff to move guys around and do different things. So I'm going to go with Baer. That's my choice there, because he creates so many of those opportunities on the offensive line. And my fifth guy, most important player on the offense, I'm not going to say he's the 5th most. It's not a ranking, but the 5th guy I would look at as being one of the most important players in the offense. And I already told you, Phil Jurkovec's off the books. We can't pick Phil. But you know who we can pick? Christian Veilleux. And I'm sort of going on the assumption that Veilleux is going to be the backup quarterback, that he's going to win the backup job. You could pick Nate Yarnell in here as well. But I always push back when fans talk about guys being injury prone or fragile, or they just get hurt all the time. Because a lot of times it's, somebody said Rodney Hammond is injury prone. Well, his ankle bent the wrong way in the West Virginia game. I mean, I don't think you need to be injury prone to miss a few weeks when your foot is pointing the opposite direction of which way it's supposed to be pointing. I don't think it has anything to do with being injury prone. You got rolled up. I don't think Rodney Hammond is injury prone. And I'm not going to sit here and say Phil Jurkovec is injury prone, but he has not played a full season any of the last 3 years when he's been the starting quarterback at Boston College. 3 years. He played 10 games in 2020. Boston College played 12. He played 6 games in 2021. Boston College played 12. And he played 8 games last season. And again, Boston College had another 12-game season. Let me just make sure they played 11 in 2020. So out of the last 3 seasons, Boston College has played 35 games, and Jurkovec has played 24 of them. He's missed 11 games, including, do the math with me here, 10 in the last 2 seasons. I'm not going to say that a guy, I don't want to, I don't know the circumstances behind each of his injuries, but the fact that he's missed that time, in addition to the fact that he's a quarterback who likes to run a little bit, maybe take some extra hits, I would say, based on the last 3 seasons of him missing at least 1 game every year and missing 10 games over the last 2 seasons, I would say there's at least a decent chance he's probably going to miss some time this year. And if he does, and maybe when he does, you're going to need that backup quarterback. And it's going to be important that you don't lose any momentum you might have, that you don't lose any games that you should win because you went to another quarterback. Jurkovec is obviously the most important player on the offense this year, but if he misses time, then the guy who steps in for him is going to assume that role as well. I think it'll be Veer as the number 2 quarterback. It could be Arnell. That'll be decided in training camp, I guess, of who the actual number 2 is. But whoever it is going to have to be able to carry the offense. Because all the pressure that's on Jurkovec, all the things we're expecting of Jurkovec, all the things we've talked about that are riding on his performance will be transferred to the backup quarterback if Jurkovec has to miss time. And like I said, if you're playing the odds, he probably will. Certainly it would be in Pitt's best interest if that doesn't come to pass, if he doesn't get hurt, nothing happens, if he has that one season where he plays all 12 games in the regular season and however many, and whatever comes in the postseason, maybe it happens. And that would be great for Pitt. I'm sure that would be their preferred scenario, that they don't lose their starting quarterback at some point during the season. But if they do, they're going to need the backup to carry that. And last year when Keaton Slovis had to miss a game and Nate Yarnell came in, he got that win at Western Michigan. So it's not like they were doomed by the backup quarterback last year. 2021, really the only game where you saw the backup quarterback for an extended period of time was the Peach Bowl, and that was really the third string quarterback who was, I guess you would say, responsible if you're going to put it on one guy. There were a lot of culprits there. 2020, when they went to the backup quarterback, Joey Yellen, after Kenny Pickett got hurt at Boston College facing off against Phil Jurkovec, Joey Yellen went down to Miami, lost that game. He faced Notre Dame, lost that game. And that was a bit of a struggle. But this year, they can't afford to lose games because the backup quarterback is in. And so, like I said, it's going to be incumbent on those guys to be ready to go and assume that mantle, because they will be the most important player on the team whenever they step on the field to replace Jurkovec if that time comes to pass. So those are the 5 most important players on offense as I see them. You can guess what we're going to talk about tomorrow. Actually, if any news comes up, if there's any transfers or anything like that, we will talk about that and push back our defensive talk until Wednesday. But for now, the plan is to talk about those key players on defense tomorrow. But this is what we'll do in the offseason. We'll find things to talk about every day of the week here on the Morning Pitt on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So make sure you like this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and then head over to Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Thanks so much for tuning in this morning. I appreciate it. I hope you had a great Mother's Day yesterday and hope you had a great weekend overall. We're at the start of a new week. I hope you have a good Monday to get things going. And we'll talk to you tomorrow morning in the Morning Pit right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.